Ignite CDA April board meeting. If we'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Now on the agenda is time for public comment. If anybody from the public would like to come forward. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the March board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Presentation for the,
Need to do the April 3rd board meeting also minutes. Yeah, we have two board.
okay,
two
and the April 3rd special call meeting, right, the phone call meeting. And-
A motion to approve the April 3rd.
Okay, sorry about that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any corrections for that? Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Now, the presentation from the Atlas Project public meeting. Mr. Phil Boyd, please come forward. Kick it off.
Thank you, Chairman Hoskins and board members. So I apologize for Councilman English and Mayor Widmeyer to have to watch this again, and anybody else who happened to watch it again.
It was so great the first time, we're happy.
I'm going to try to change it up so there's a little bit of variety here.
Was that the one at the Croc Center? I mean, not the Croc Center, the Frontier
Ice Arena.
Yes. Yeah, so,
I was there, but I couldn't hear it. The acoustics were so bad, so this will be like the first time for me.
Rub it in.
yes, yes, it was a challenge. So this is a summary of the meeting that was held on March 22nd at the Frontier Ice Arena. And both Troy Tymonson and Tony had asked that I come to the council and the board and just give a little summary and answer any questions you might have about what we heard from what was presented to the public, what we heard from the public, and then if you had any input about moving forward to our next public meeting on March 25th. So the objective of the meeting in the open house was first to continue the conversation with the public about how we're taking their input and shaping to some extent the idea of the public space development and the site development. And it started with a core vision group meeting. The meeting that was on the 22nd was a second meeting, and then also provide them the realities of how having to economically balance the site. I think we all know the public would say, gee, let's make the whole thing a park. They might say that. They actually did say that. Some of them said that. But we realize that's not economically feasible. So we want to continue to introduce that reality to them. So that was part of it. And then also show them some options for road network, public space, sizing and character, and some options for doing shoreline restoration. And then we did an open house to solicit their feedback. We started with land density because we want to give them context. In red is high density. This is down at Riverstone. This is the theater, and those are the condominiums. So that gives you that's high density. Out at Mill River, you can see some of the other density in that area. The blue is park and public space. So it gives you a little idea of what the density might look like. Next door, it's shown as 17 to 34 units, which we anticipate Mr. Douglas might head in that direction with that property. And then the gray is commercial. So this is a scale that we're again trying to demonstrate to them the balance between public and private space. And it starts out with public acreage. Gee, let's have lots of public acreage. Well, that translates into you need to have private acreage to develop and fund the purchase of the public acreage. As you add features to it, you need to add some density to your private acreage. As you add more acreage to the public space, let's make the park bigger, let's add some more features to it, you need to now add the intensity. So you might think of density as smaller lots, and the intensity is maybe going vertical. So low density is single family product. Higher density intensity might be single family townhomes, stack flat condominiums, those types of products. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. If that's not sufficient, you're probably looking at city and Ignite funds, which that shouldn't surprise us, and perhaps a general obligation bond. And again, this was just trying to get them thinking about it before they went out and started voting on what they liked. This was also another illustration, a lightly developed park here, a more developed park on the right, on the x-axis, single-family residential here, condominium product up here, and really it would be probably more like a mix of uses. As you increase the mix of uses, that will drive up the revenue off of the site as opposed to a single product type. And I can talk some more about that if you'd like. We presented the information to them, solicited their feedback, kind of in a classic dot exercise on those 4 topics. And these were the results of them. And I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version. These each had an individual slide associated with them, and we talked through in detail about the merits of a grid network, a meandering network, and a meandering with a grid, and received their feedback. And you can see the meandering with the grid was favorably received, and the grid was not received. And Chairman Hoskins, I should have asked if the board wants to ask questions while I'm giving the presentation. I'm glad to take those
Thank you.
as
You're
we
not
go.
a shy bunch.
Okay. And the public space, the size that, and the relationship between density and public funding and funding that comes from land sales. And these are some very early scenarios, and we tried to provide a ratio of public space, a percentage of public area. And you can see as you go deeper into the options, the public space gets larger. The land sales value will increase. The product type has to change, obviously, as you get bigger public space because you have to fill in the private space. The Ignite funding can potentially actually change a little bit and go down, and the possibility of a general obligation bond goes up. And these were, again, bigger slides. We spent a fair amount of time walking them through, attempting to talk over the hockey players and their guests. And the figure skaters too. And then these over here represent the votes from the dot exercise. And the thing that surprised me a little bit is the voting on the more intense development. I don't know, we can't probably call it equal, but it seemed that the public was prepared to accept a more dense, diverse product type in order to get bigger public space. I saw Commissioner Metz had a question.
I'm sure there's numbers associated to it, but I'm wondering with the graphs, what are the large differences between option 2 and option 3 per se in terms of numbers?
As far as dollar value or votes?
Dollar.
That is not being, it's a relationship at this point because we're too early in the process to do that. And we were intentionally approximate on this because the data at the point that we had this meeting was preliminary. We're still working through the process, still collecting market information. And it's actually evolved a little bit from this meeting to today. And it will continue to refine it. So the information you all see, whether you're at the public meeting on the 25th or at the workshop at the 26th, will actually have numerical data that you can look at.
A couple of questions on number 3. First of all, it appears there's 2 commercial pieces down on the waterfront. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Second of all, there's 2 water features in that one versus 0 on option 1.
Correct.
Okay. Were either of those 2 items the thing that might have driven some of the votes? Is the fact that you've got those types of commercial opportunities on the waterfront, which a lot of people I think like, or even the water features?
It could be, and that's a really good
Because
question.
you really don't have apples to apples there, just looking at commercial versus park space, because you're starting to add some elements.
Exactly, and that's a completely valid observation, and it was intentional, and we intend to test it in our next meeting.
Just checking on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we intend to further test it at our next meeting. The feedback we've received from the public, and a question came up last night from, who did it come up from? It came up from Woody, council member Woody. to be respectful. He had asked a question about what are we really gleaning from this? And what we're gleaning is option 2 and option 3 have similar merits, even though we presented, or similar votes, even though we presented differences in them. From a land use perspective, we will tell you, and our real estate and our land planners will tell you, having commercial not on the waterfront, set back from the waterfront, so the public still always has access to the waterfront, but having that commercial component there does 2 things. It creates a place, increases energy, makes it a desirable place to be, but 2, it drives up the value of the property because it's looking out at the water and it has people coming into it. So we intend to lead next week with commercial on the waterfront. All the options you see will have commercial on the waterfront because we believe we were kind of given a vote here to take it in that direction. And as advisors to this board, we would be telling you, if you have to choose between one or the other, choose option 3 because it's going to drive the value of the land up. Yep. Let's see, okay. And then the type of public space character, again, kind of lightly developed and more intensely developed. You can see option 2 was most favorable and option 3 was least favorable. We think that based on the comments we received at that station, it was driven by the idea that folks believe this was a marina, a moorage marina, a pay to buy a boat slip marina. Even though during the presentation, which folks probably couldn't hear me, I tried to be very deliberate and explain that it was a transient marina. And this goes back to our discussion we were just having about a transient marina is when you pull up for a couple hours, go in, have lunch, get back in your boat and leave. That adds value to the commercial property that is adjacent to that. And without that transient marina, you can imagine the buyer of that property and the user of that commercial space is going to say, gosh, I'm losing a revenue stream. I'd love to have something out there like that. And again, we will present this concept again on the 25th in a more deliberate fashion to make sure folks understand this is not a marina for rent. It is a transient marina, and also explain the economic value of that. So trying to educate and make sure that they understand the value of those components.
Just one quick comment. I'm in agreement with you. I got the same take looking at it. They see the public losing waterfront to a bunch of private moorage.
Right.
And I think that needs to be explored further. I think a lot of people too would like a day-use marina where they could bring the kids and a picnic and go on the beach or something, as well as eating in a restaurant.
Right.
So, yeah, if you can maybe present that, you know, a little bit better so they understand what's going on. I can see looking at that and being scared about it.
Yes, and it was probably the image selection and the challenge with describing it. Fortunately, we'll be in this room on the 25th. The acoustics are better, and we'll have a more focused, we won't have to have as many options.
Right.
Moving on to the riverbank stabilization and restoration, there's really 4 types of riverbank out there. Very tall riverbank that doesn't lend itself for people going from the uplands down to the water. There's lower riverbank where you could scramble down from the upland down to the water. And then there's really low riverbank. And we intend to treat them differently. We presented these concepts. As I mentioned last night at council, everybody really loved this idea of a retaining wall, which is obviously more expensive than vegetation. But they had a perception that they would be able to walk along the shoreline here, and that's really not possible during high water in the high tall riverbank areas. And so, again, another selection of imagery will improve that. We still got a good perception on how they feel about riprap, and you'll see that in the subsequent options here. In the mid-height area, there's opportunities to do multi-functional structures like this. Those were very well received in vegetation stabilization, riprap not so much. And then in the low riverbank areas, we think that there is an opportunity, and it may have historically been the way that the eastern portion of the site was originally, that it was actually shoreline, and it's been manipulated over the last 100 years and converted into what appears to be a tall or a medium height riverbank. We think there may be the opportunity to reconstruct some shoreline in there or put some very low walls in there and low plaza type structures, considering if funding permits. There's always the option of vegetation, but the the riprap is probably not a hot topic or a desirable one. So upcoming meetings, as I mentioned, the 25th will be here, 5:30 to 7:30. The way that format, it will be slightly different than we had at the Ice Arena. We'll have a presentation. It will be really fewer options, but more education, and I say educational, kind of informing the public on the realities of developing the site. There'll be an open house so folks can come up and talk to the entire team, the real estate people, the land planners, me, our public space people. And then afterwards, we're going to go back and have a community Q&A. And so if a question didn't get answered, folks will have the opportunity to have Q&A afterwards. And then on the 26th at the Student Union Building at NIC, we'll have the workshop. And you can imagine that presentation will be much more numerical and more driven to policymakers as opposed to a kind of a generic public presentation. More numbers, more graphs, and helping the board and the council focus in on policy type decisions, or at least to present them. And so you can consider them. So that is my update. I'm glad to answer any more questions.
Very nice.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody questions? Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the committee reports. Finance Committee, Commissioner Arman.
Okay, I'll try to move this. Starting with the Lake District balance sheet, the Lake District experienced a decrease in cash assets for February month end of $271,817. Other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account had $27 earned interest on the account balance for the month of February. The liabilities and fund balance, mortgage and notes payable line item decrease of $302,685 for March reflects a standard month of debt service of $1,564 and payoff of the Jameson Library note of $301,121. The bond 2017 series note line item value reflects an increase of $484,000 due to a March draw on the note. All other liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit to the due to the yards line item. The Lake District P&L, the Lake District received $55,670 in tax increment revenue from the county in March. Agency-funded initiatives, the downtown parking garage line item of $486,896. The special project reserve line item value of $20,400 is the final payment to Fish Plumbing for the 301 Lakeside Avenue sewer realignment project. Property divestiture line item value of $12,123 reflects earnest money deposits for the following North Park Drive lot sales, lots 2, 4, 7, 8, and 10. All other P&L expenditure line items are normal for the month. Moving on to the River District, the balance sheet, the assets. River District experienced a $5,460 increase in cash assets from the February month end. Liabilities and fund balance, all other liability parameters were either normal or unchanged for the month, including the 2% due to the arts. The P&L for the River District. The River District received $14,651 in tax increment revenue from the county in March. Agency-funded program line item reflects zero payment made to Salty's Way project, and all other P&L expenditures were normal for the month. That is the financial report for March 2018. Now for payables. First payable was for $8,287. This was for Holly Troxel. Second was for $13,490.80 Performing Arts Center feasibility. The total for that, total contract, $62,750. So this was a payment towards that. Next was the Welsh Comer Engineers payment of $3,887.50. This was towards the Tilford Lane Property and Trade Initiative. A payment for $84,775 for the Atlas Mill Planning Initiative, also to Welsh Comer Engineers. And then the larger payment for the month was a total of $484,073.30. This is broken out, this was for the downtown parking structure project, broken out the following way. $3,325.30 to Miller Stauffer Design Team, $476,235 to contractor Tila Riviere Equipment Excavation, and $4,513 to contractor MSA Strata, a third party, for testing. So that was a total of $484,073.30. All total for March payables, $594,513.67. Those are the payables for March.
The 84,775 for Welch Comer on the Atlas Mill site planning, is that the money that we approved, or is that the money that the city is reimbursing us for?
We approved.
We approved this one. Okay, so we haven't
Plan.
started spending the other?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
That's my report.
A motion to approve the financials and payables.
Second.
Moved in second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Thanks, Mick. Commissioner Jordan, Parking Committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything new to report on the City Parking Commission. On the parking structure project, I'll turn that over to Tony, and you've seen some of those emails and that kind of get you up to speed on what we have to talk about here, so I'll turn it over to Tony.
Sure. So if you've driven by the parking garage project, it's progressing well. They've got the foundations poured. They got the centerline foundation poured. They got half of the lower level, the ground floor poured on the east side. I was over there today. They're still doing earthwork to get the west side ready for pouring. They're removing the wooden slats out of the shoring operations around the backside, and they're starting to fill in and compact those areas. So they are looking pretty good. They did have a little bit of a spell of rain here recently that kind of slowed them down on some of the pours. But they're pretty much on schedule, and it's no major issues. So it's looking good. Now, the other items under this report are a couple change orders that I'd like to visit with the board on. And the first one involves parking equipment, and I invited Chris Bosley from the City of Fort Wayne City of Engineer to kind of visit with you. I've shared this background with you via email. And Chris, if you can come up and just kind of walk the board through the proposal from PSG, appreciate that.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. The reason for this change order is because we are looking to install access control into the parking garage. And originally that was being batted around and not known exactly what we were going to do with that. And now that we're getting close to the point where as you heard, the floor is going to be poured, there are some elements that we need to get into the construction so that we don't lose that opportunity and then have to retrofit them in there. So we would rather get them in now. So we got this proposal to install loops and do the design. And the loops are the detection loops that are similar to that you would see or you wouldn't see, but that are at a traffic signal that would detect your presence and then give you the green light, hopefully. And these ones would control either the access gates or the doors going in and out, because the way that the parking structure is designed is that there would be gates coming off of Coeur d'Alene Avenue and a door type system for a different portion of the garage off of 3rd Street. Well, this $15,930 change order would provide those loops put into the concrete so that they're poured and ready to go, and any other conduit that we need to run electricity and fiber or whatever afterwards. And it would also pay for the design going forward for the pay structures, the pay booths, and things like that would go into the project. So what we're asking is for Ignite to fund this portion of this change order so that we can get this part done while we figure out our next moves on how we'd like to move forward. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question. So, I don't know exactly what the final plan is, or maybe you don't either, on how the parking control is going to be there. But do you have any trouble with those detector loops? You know, on traffic signals, they have trouble with motorcycles on the detector loops. Is that a concern in the parking garage here?
We have talked about that, and we've requested that the loops have 3 rotations of wire in them to help increase that sensitivity so that we don't have that problem.
Do you know how much of the 15,000 is for the design work and how much of it is for the actual loops in the ground? None of the documentation really.
I don't know the exact breakout for that, no.
Deanna?
So as I understand it, if we don't install these loops, later on when we go to install other portions of the parking electronic machinery, we would have to tear up the concrete. So this actually is a long-term savings for the overall project.
Correct. We could either cut open the concrete to put them in there, or there's an option of surface mounted that they don't last as long, and that's why we want to get the ones that are poured into the concrete to give us a longer life out of them.
It does seem like this is essential to move forward the project.
So the general plan is to have a gate on the Coeur d'Alene Avenue entrance exit, and then some kind of an up and down door off of 3rd Street.
Right, and that part of the parking garage was envisioned that it could be kind of a pay-by-the-month type system, where it would be a higher security with the normal gate system on the general area, yes.
Okay. Mick?
I've got a question. So this is part of the pay structure then, is that correct?
The what?
The pay structure?
Yes.
So without having this, we couldn't have the pay structure, so we can't charge without the system in place.
Correct.
So who is going to benefit the most from the receipts from the pay structure? The city, correct? Or is it the parking commission, the parking fund, or who's going to benefit, who's going to get the revenue from that?
I would imagine it would be the city, but I
mean, it's going to be either on a contract that the city's going to make with someone, or it's going to be
right.
the city that's going to collect it, correct?
Right.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that is because it seems to me that Ignite's building this structure, but Ignite's not going to receive any of the proceeds from the use of the structure. All the proceeds are going to go to the city through the parking fund. In my mind, these are expenses that should be covered by the city or the parking fund, because that's where the revenue's going to go. Now, I know this is just the precursor to a much, much larger contract that we're going to be asked to look at down the road, but I'm kind of trying to see if they all should be bunched together as one contract or one cost. I mean, we're looking at $16,000 now, which seems pretty small when you look at the whole scope of this project, for sure. But the next project is much, much larger.
for the other portion of.
For the other portion.
What you
And
saw,
I
yeah.
guess when it comes to that, then I'm really having a problem with the fact that Ignite would pay for that, when Ignite will never see the revenue, but the city will see ongoing revenue for years to come.
Right, and that's why we just wanted to bring this portion forward now, because we really haven't figured out what the next step should be.
But there will be a next step, is that correct?
Yes,
And the first number I saw on that's in the 200,000 range,
correct.
if not more. So why would that not come out of the parking funds as well as this?
I can't answer that question.
I guess maybe we'll have to decide that down the road, but to me, these are costs that should not be associated with the construction of the facility, other than the fact that they're necessary to collect the funds down the road.
Mick, that's the reason why I asked if there was a breakdown between the design fees and putting the actual loop, whatever it is, stuff into the ground, because that makes a lot of sense to me to be part of the parking structure. But the design work for a system, which kind of leads into the discussion you're having is, I was just curious what the balance of that, if it was known how that was split.
I think it's all the same. I mean, you have to have one to have the other. It's just a precursor to the next step.
Just have a quick question. So, anyway, we don't have it finalized how the parking control will be done yet. I guess that's a little up in the air, but we're definitely sure we need these detector loops.
Well, we know exactly where they need to go. We know where the pay structures would go, all the gates would go, all of that. It just hasn't been determined what kind of system we want to go with in the end of this. So we don't want to miss our opportunity to get these loops and all that in the ground right now before it's too late and we have to retrofit the system.
And then maybe you can just tell me real quick, so just basically how's it gonna work? You're gonna have like a ticket or something that goes in the machine and then the loop will, like the detector loop will alert the machine where the ticket goes, or it will alert the arm to go up, or how does that fit together kinda?
If the person has already paid, then the loop tells that the vehicle is there. There's also a loop on the back side of the gate so that the gate doesn't come back down on top of your car before you've left the clearance of it. So, and that's the reason for, there's essentially doubling up on loops before and after each of the gates or doors.
Okay.
It seems to me that this makes sense. I'm arguing over who's going to pay for it. Right now, seems we're already, what, 3 million, more, a substantial amount of money
Way more than 3
involved
million.
in this. How much?
Double that, and we've
Double
got
that?
more.
Well, 3 million
6 point
over the
whatever
original.
million. And in 3 years, it's going to belong to the city anyway, 3 to 4 years. So it doesn't seem like this is something that we should be too concerned about. I do believe that we do need to really start talking about the end result. That equipment seems to be pretty substantial. There needs to be some discussion between the city and LCDC on those numbers. But this is part of the construction, and to me, we're in it for the construction. That's our job. It saves money in the end. It just makes sense to go ahead and do this.
Mr. Chairman, in Chris's defense, Chris kind of got in late in the game.
Thank you.
Parking equipment equation. And I think that it was felt that this portion of it was part of the construction of the garage. The city very well intends on using parking fund revenue to pay for the actual equipment, not only the gates and the collection equipment, but also the cameras.
Okay.
So we're not going to come back with a huge ask of Ignite for that equipment. It's been talked a long time, and we've been discussing this for, well, in detail, well over a year. So the city had intended the parking fund was going to pick up the cost of the equipment, but equally as important as the equipment is the cameras.
Okay.
And so that's something.
That's good to know, because I had the impression that we were going to be asked for that also. So.
No, that's not my
In
intention.
that case, 15,900 sounds like a bargain.
But again, Chris is filling in, Chris is getting late in the game here, so we've got to cut him a little slack on this.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Under the bus.
Mr. Chairman, Phase 2, so what is Phase 2? I know that we're not there yet, but what does that really include at this point? Because I'm sure it's not very well defined.
The
but-
Phase 2 with the big price tag?
Yeah.
That included the actual gates, the doors, the cameras to see that you're coming in and out of those areas, the gates. There's like a server that needs to run all of this, the wiring, all that kind of thing.
Additional comment? Yep.
I move that we accept the change order for 15,000, and whatever the numbers are, final numbers, to install the
Loops.
leads or whatever they are in the garage.
Yeah, detector loops.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Can we have the motion include that it's for the loops as well as design work? Or whatever that was, how it was stated.
The Phase 1 breakdown.
Yeah.
I would
Phase
rather,
one
yeah, I'd rather
breakdown.
have it be just for the Phase 1.
Yeah,
of
Phase
the-
1,
breakdown,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
And the
correct.
exact amount was 15,000?
930.
Good point.
That was your motion and second, correct?
Correct.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
The next change order for the parking garage, I'm going to ask Mike Walker with Millersdorf Architects to come up and visit with the board. I shared the background with you regarding changing a little bit of the backside, the alley side of the parking facility from precast concrete panels to cable railing to save the project about $70,000. And Mike has a short slideshow to show you.
So one of the charges when we basically got the bid number back and we were discussing about the total number and is there any savings or any of that kind of stuff that could happen through the project. And so our team went back, we looked at the whole structure, we tried to find things that didn't change the intent of what we were trying to build, but would provide some savings back to the project. And one of the ones that came back very early on was modifying the south elevation, the elevation that's on the alley. And so just to kind of orient you again, I'm sure you're all familiar, but Coeur d'Alene Avenue, this is how it sat before we started construction. 4th Street right here, 3rd Street, this is the federal building right here, some of the Ignite properties that are owned here. So kind of orient you to the site, but I put these in here just so you had some context that goes along with this. Here's another view looking kind of over top the site, back towards the federal building, and then looking back the other way. The current design, I mean, you've seen some of these renderings before. We're basically on the public right-of-way. We're doing a lot of brick and split-face masonry, kind of making it historical looking. And then as we get up off the pedestrian level, we go to more of a traditional spandrel panel to get the cost economics out of the parking garage, is why we went that way. Then going to the actual cable rail itself. So what we proposed to the contractor, and we've been working with them on getting the actual cost of it, on the south elevation, we had precast, concrete precast panels that would basically ring the whole structure. One of the initial discussions, which is a very cost-effective way to build a parking garage, is basically change those precast panels to cables. And this kind of shows you the scope of it. It's just along the alley. The east and west elevations and the south elevations don't change from what we originally presented. This would be, so you can see the intent of precast panels and how the concrete looks. So this would be real similar to what the back elevation would look like. A lot of concrete, not a lot of brick, but that's, we always had seen the alley as kind of a secondary elevation from that standpoint. Here's another example of that. Going to the cable rail, this is what we're proposing we do. We have to provide a vehicle restraint system to keep cars from obviously falling off the parking structure. And to do that, there's a couple different scenarios you can do. You can do it out of cables and chain link. You can do it out of just cables. We explored both options. We saw that the cable and chain link was more than just straight cables. And then the next step would be where we are today, which is the precast panels. So going with that, here's some more examples just to kind of give you an idea. But after it was all said and done and we had negotiated with the contractor, we found a savings of $70,000 that could go towards the project if we changed that south elevation. And so we felt that was substantial enough to bring to you guys for some savings, and we didn't feel that it had a dramatic impact to the character and feel and intent of the design that we were trying to achieve. So from there, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Brad?
I'm not firm one way or the other on this. I raised this question with our parking team. The only thing I would just bring up for consideration is the precast concrete panels give shielding, visual shielding of the cars. And I guess it depends at from what vantage point you're looking up there. You know, some of that would be blocked by some of the existing buildings, and if some more buildings get built there, that would block it. But you have the visual shielding, and I don't know if there's any difference in safety of kids might be more likely to climb on those cables or anything than they would the precast panels, or if we go with the cables, we need to have the chain link along with it. But that's my 2 points for discussion. I mean, anytime we can save 70,000, that's great, but that's the trade-off I see.
Well, mine was related to, just want to make sure with safety that it's just, you know, as good of as the concrete, and, you know, I don't know what they have on that parking structure in Spokane, but a few years ago that somebody, you know, drove off of that, and we have, you know, winter bad weather, cars slide in, so just, I mean, I'd want to make sure that, oh yeah, it's, you know, it's as good as the concrete options.
And that's partly why it's taken so long to bring this to you guys, is we had to go through several steps, especially with our structural engineer, to design a system that uses the cables that would be just as equal as the precast panels. Cable rails are used quite extensively in parking garages. And I'd also mentioned that there's a system, a secondary system with chain link that you can do. What you're trying to accomplish with the cable rails is two things. You have the cables themselves are at certain elevations to basically catch the car. If somebody runs into it, it's going to stop the car from going over the edge. But the number of cables that we're ending up having to do is more because we're providing the safety level, because you have to provide you can't have more than a 4-inch sphere to allow somebody to go through these cables and fall off the edge of the structure, and then they go up to 42 inches, again, to create a safety barrier there from a pedestrian standpoint. And so we're quite confident with the design that we're proposing to you, it would satisfy those two needs. And we've also, through our progress meetings, the city's building inspectors have been there, and they've been on board with all that as well. So we're confident that it would do what you're asking it to do.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Chairman? Mike, the resort is cables, isn't it?
It's a combination of cables and pickets. It has both. I don't think I had a picture, but it wasn't in there. But yeah, similar thing. It has cables and pickets.
And this, you're talking about just the alley, right?
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we would keep the curbs and the concrete on the east elevation, the west elevation, and the north elevation. So really, from a visual standpoint, and Commissioner Jordan, you had talked about this, we didn't see that as a major impact because, first of all, the buildings that front next to this property are commercial use and based. The federal building isn't really used after hours. In the winter, you might see some dark times that you might have some headlights. But there's a big parking lot for a majority of that block, and then across the street's a big parking lot, and then you go across the alley again, you're looking at back of buildings where there isn't a lot of windows. And that's kind of why I'd thrown the context slides in there so that you can get a sense of, you know, if there is any headlights that go through the cable rail, it's not going to have a big impact to the surrounding properties.
I guess I'm thinking about, when you look at that picture, the parking lots and sidewalks and all the open space where you'd have a vantage point and you could look into the cars, and you have cars pulling in and out and the headlights shining through and kind of turning around as the cars back out. So, you know, I guess that's what I'm looking at, and then I just hope some kids wouldn't be inclined to try and climb up those cables or anything like that, you know. More inclined than they would if there was just a smooth concrete slab there. So that's my concerns. I don't know, maybe it's worth 70,000. I'm just kind of looking at the trade-offs. I'm just throwing that out for discussion.
Additional comment?
I guess I would make a motion to approve the change from the panels to the cables on the alley side of the garage structure. I think $70,000, I think it's great thinking on Mike and his team's part, and I don't see a great downside to it, so I would make that motion to approve that change.
Okay. Second. Moved in second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks a million, Mike.
Thank you.
Midtown Ad Hoc Committee update.
That would be me. The Midtown Ad Hoc Committee has not met since the last board meeting. Our thought process right now is that while we are having the parking study conducted, that we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with planning and organization of something until we're aware of the results of the parking study. Tony, Mr. Burns, informed me that the parking study would be done no later than the beginning of September, hopefully earlier than that. So keeping an eye on that time frame, we will meet again and start at least getting our organization together for when we have that information, and make sure that's included as part of whatever community outreach that we do, that we can share those results.
Might be good to have that parking data, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. North Park Drive. Update. Ad hoc committee.
I can take that one if you'd like. I sent an email out to you all yesterday, kind of giving you a status report of how the lot sales are going. So just to recap for the public, we've had 4 lots closed to date, totaling $941,200. We have 2 lots that are pending closure. Lot 2 for a price of $198,000, and Lot 5 for a price of $235,300. Those are scheduled to close in May. And then on Monday, we listed the remaining 4 lots, lots 1, 3, 6, and 9, with Lowe's Flat Fee Realty at a fee of $299. Those have showed up on the MLS, and they are out there for perusal by the real estate world. I did get one call from a broker seeking more information on the lots yesterday. So they're out there, they're live, and we'll see what energy they generate. As you recall, the pricing for those lots that are with Lowe's on the MLS, or Lot 1 is $239,000, Lot 3 is $279,000, Lot 6 is $279,000, and Lot 9 is $269,000. So that's kind of where we're at.
Good. Comments? Thank you, sir. Next, move on into your executive director's report.
All right, I'll just give you some initiative updates. First one is Performing Arts Center feasibility study update. HVS Convention Consultants held an update conference call with project sponsors the week of March 26th. At that time, they shared preliminary observations during the call. Topics discussed included a CDA market assessment, industry and participation trends, results from interviews and questionnaires, and comparable facility analyses. Site and demand analyses are currently ongoing. The next update conference call will be in mid-May, with a final presentation plan for the June 20th Ignite CDA board meeting. So they're tracking along. They're still getting their arms around all of the issues. The next conference call update will probably have a little more fine-tuned findings, but the final report will come to the board in June. The Atlas Mill Site Planning Project, as Mr. Boyd alluded to, we've had 2 community input sessions to date, February 7th and March 22nd. The Welch Comer consultant team is incorporating the input received at the community sessions into their planning efforts. And as Mr. Boyd pointed out, the next public input session will be held on April 25th at 5:30 in the Coeur d'Alene Library's community room, in this room here. Memorial Park update. Landscaping efforts are underway in certain areas of the project site. If you've driven by there, you've seen a lot of activity. Cameron Raleigh is working to complete the parking lot area. The restroom facility is under construction. Construction of the skate park element of the Memorial Park project is still scheduled to begin in late spring with completion of late summer. So we're moving forward on that, a lot of activity. South Tees Way Road revitalization. The contractor is planning to restart efforts and complete the final phase of the project the first week of May. The primary work tasks remaining on South Tees are second lift of the paving, the asphalt, remaining illumination, landscaping, irrigation, and minor concrete road repair. Assuming the contractor resumes work in early May, the contract time frame will end in mid-July. So that's when completion is required due to the days in the contract. So a couple months away from bringing closure to that project. Railroad right-of-way surplus property sale, no real change from the last report I gave you. We're under contract with Active West for that property sale. They're in kind of the middle of their 90-day due diligence period, which started on March 12th. And we are anticipating, hopefully, that no due diligence issues will arise and we can schedule closing for that $320,000 sale.
Just FYI, remember that DEQ did not find any hazardous material at all on our property.
Right. There's no site remediation necessary, according to DEQ. Ignite at Riverstone, formerly referred to as a Topher Lane project, still working with Welchcomer engineers on rationalizing potential opportunities on that site. We have no new news to report this time, so we're still working that issue and hope to have to bring some potential solutions to the board in the not too distant future. And finally, the North Idaho Collaborative Education Facility, the NICE project. As you recall, the Idaho Department of Public Works awarded the contract to Geno Construction for $7.5 million. All the alternates are in at that price. The cost estimate was $8 million, so we still have some cost savings that we're going to look, hopefully, to realize for the agency. Construction fencing for the project has been installed. The old timber building that was on site has been moved, and the building's foundation was demolished this week. The existing river building will be demolished next month, and some site work has begun as well. So action is occurring on site, as Commissioner Garcia can probably see every day.
Yay.
Yay, 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 we're excited.
That's taken a while.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Now on the agenda is time for board commissioner comments. Deanna.
The Arts Commission at their last meeting voted to budget next year for an art piece on the southeast corner of the parking garage,
Oh, nice.
where the brick. So that is in play for next year.
Did you say the southeast corner?
Pardon?
The southeast corner?
Southeast corner, yeah.
Okay.
It's where the big
4th Street side?
brick corner is.
Wouldn't that be the northeast corner?
That's what I'm trying to visualize that, yeah.
I think Mr. Walker can.
She's correct, it is on the southeast corner. There's on the,
So it's
the southeast corner.
kind of behind the courthouse,
Okay, on the alley.
but it'll be
On 4th Street.
more on the,
Here we go.
so there'll be more frontage, it'll be more visible. There you go, where that round thing is. No, that's the other end.
So it's on where you're seeing that tree
Well,
there.
maybe it is supposed
On
to
that
be on the
face there, there's a brick
northeast
panel
corner.
right
It's
there.
up on 4th Street.
I think it's on 4th
Okay.
Street. I believe it's where that round thing is, on the northeast corner.
We had identified in the construction documents,
We did identify that as a location, correct?
right here we did, where the
For
cursor is.
an arts piece.
Yeah, there's
I
a
think
big brick panel right there
somewhere
as you
we-
come up.
Anyway, they voted to do an art piece on the parking garage.
One of the corners.
So on one of those corners.
On
I
4th
believe it's
Street.
on the 4th Street, 4th and Court Lane corner.
Perfect.
Okay. Great wherever.
I also just want to remind everyone that next month is the Sergeant Greg Moore dedication, the project in McEwen Park, to show up and show our support.
What is the date on that?
May 15th.
May 15th, 4:30.
Election
It's
day.
gorgeous, it really is.
Anyway, it'll be in a very visible location.
Very.
And it will add to the parking garage.
It looks beautiful.
And I believe also, didn't we get an email from Tony about the Arts Commission put out a call to arts for some of the roundabouts on Celtice?
Yeah, we did put out a call to artists for the roundabouts on Celtice. There were some recommendations that there's 2 roundabouts, so they kind of wanted them to coordinate with one another. And so that call has either gone out or is in the process of going out. We did complete a call for bike racks on the front of the library. If you're facing the door, they're on the right-hand side, which right now has a temporary bike rack. And that bid was awarded to Alan and Mary D. Dodge. And they're going to do some somewhat whimsical animals that are freestanding that you can tie your bike to. So they're going to, not only will they add, I think, to the front of the library, but they're fun. And we had put out a call for the lower level right out here to kind of encourage the kids to, instead of dropping their bikes in the middle of the path, to put them on a bike rack. We did not receive anything that the committee felt would be effective there, so we're going to reissue that call.
Okay.
So I think that's about what the Arts Commission is in process. We do have a piece that is in process that will be down at Riverstone along the waterfront there. And it's, that call was actually awarded last year, and it's taken the artist some time to complete it. But it's going to be a nice piece in Riverstone. Riverstone has contributed a great deal, of course, of funds to the Arts Commission, so it's nice that we're going to be able to put a piece down there. So the Arts Commission is actively working, and I'll try to keep you all updated.
Thanks, Deanna. Anything else? Brad?
I just wanted to tell Deanna, one of the things I hear the most compliments on is the wraps you do around the traffic signal control boxes.
Yep.
Hear a lot of positive comments.
I've heard some good feedback on that, too.
The control boxes, if they belong to the city, we're able to put art on them. And we did issue a call for some more of those to be completed. If they belong to the state, they haven't given us the opportunity to do that.
So I assume the rusty ones with no wraps probably belong to the state.
Yeah, the rusty ones belong to the state.
But I see people photographing them all the time.
Yeah, so when you see a rusty one, it isn't ours.
Okay. Good.
And just related to the artwork that's going in here by the library, won't have to worry about smoke when they come to visit. So.
Yeah, I think these pieces are going to be a lot of fun. They're
Thank you very much.
whimsical, but they're going to work. You can have art that doesn't work, and these are going to work.
Now it's time for the second public comment section. Any public comment? Seeing none, and I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session according to Idaho Code Section 74-206, subsection 1C, to acquire an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency.
Second.
Someone moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Or no, roll call.
Goodlander?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Arman? Yes. Whitmire?
Yes.
Jordan?
Yes.
English?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chapkus?
Yes.
We're in executive session. And that's a wrap.